using a screwdriver sometimes. Being a good intuitive type, you know. What's that? You know. So I should have had more shop, and that's another insight, see. We're not doing a good enough job with males on helping them with their competitive energies, getting them channeled into healthy forms. We're doing a lousy job with that. So it's not that we're doing such a great job with the males. We're not. But we have to look at these four forms of development, the four, you know what Aristotle called these things? You know, I didn't know Aristotle understood all this. I was lecturing in Washington, and there's this wonderful man by the name of Jody Palmore, who is a paraplegic, but a philosopher of great skill, particularly an Aristotelian philosopher. Does a lot of mentoring with young men in the Washington, D.C. area. And he pointed out to me, he said, Robert, you know, you need to study Aristotle. You know, my response, you know, I used to teach ancient philosophy. What's that got to do with this? Well, he says, well, I want you to notice the four cardinal virtues are describing exactly what you're talking about. Aristotle spoke about that centuries and centuries and centuries ago. What do you mean? Well, courage is a warrior virtue. Prudence, you know what prudence is? Anybody know what prudence is? A lot of people call it prudence in the South, but and in the Northeast, but do you know what it is? Anybody define it? It is magician, but how would you define prudence? It's a kind of wisdom. It is being able to anticipate the consequences of a series of actions. That's pretty close to wisdom. If I do this, such and such is going to happen. So I can take responsibility for that particular line of actions. So prudence is a magician virtue. You're absolutely right. Temperance. Temperance, lover virtue. It never meant what the Women's Christian Temperance Union thought it meant. Temperance is being able to get as much erotic stuff into your life without making you crazy as possible. That's what it's about. They knew that if you get more than a certain amount of erotic stuff in your life, it just dissolves everything. You know, love, I always love to say, is the universal solvent. It will destroy whatever structures exist if you have too much of it. And what about the fourth cardinal virtue? You know what it is? Justice. That's a king and queen virtue. So classics education does have something to do with today. And if we're not, in our social public policy, educating for courage, prudence, temperance, and justice, we're dropping the ball badly. Okay. So you can think of another, all sorts of expressions of this. Let me talk just a moment about some of my favorite horrible topics. Now, it is a mark of how completely misguided a lot of our leadership is that they believe that passing gun control laws is going to stop the violence in our society. A number of you and I have conversed about that. It's not that some rational gun control enforcement is not needed. My sense is that probably we will all be like one big Winnetka soon. Winnetka, Illinois. I mean, there'll be Winnetka-style gun laws on the books everywhere. But this is not going to deal with the problem at all. Anybody that has honest relationships with law enforcement officers that are on the street dealing with this know that. You cannot substitute maturation. You cannot substitute removal of one particular form of weapon from the hands of law-abiding citizens for facing the task of maturation of young males' aggressivity. It's impossible. It will not be effective. The only thing in the world that's going to give us a chance to lower the violence in our society is facing the challenge of mentoring of young males, period, all over the planet. No one wants to hear this because they do not want to be involved with them, period. They hate to hear me say this. Who wants to take the time to do this? People are not lining up in most of our cities to volunteer. Now, I'm not a pessimist. I don't think that's solely because they have no interest whatsoever in that. I think it's because they don't understand why this would be relevant to the situation. There are hundreds upon thousands of retired, outstanding men who are spending their lives on the golf course getting brain dead. They have no idea that they are radically important for the future of our civilization, because our society has done everything it can do to teach them that they are useless and worthless and should get out of the way. Now I'm going to tell you how we could turn our situation around in a decade max. 1 decade max, probably less. We could recruit from the AARP. We could institute networking connections between correctional institutions that deal with first-time offenders. Now, if a person is someone who is afraid of his shadow, we wouldn't want to pair him up, although he'd probably grow a lot in the experience. But I'd start with all of those lieutenant colonels, Marine lieutenant colonels, that are out there playing golf, you know. I'd start with those former Green Berets, and I'd pair them up with these boys that think they're tough. This could be done in less than a year. We could have this done in less than a year. It's a simple logistical matter that any person with any sensation function could attend to. Now, there are a lot of young criminals, quote unquote, in our society, but the gross number is not large compared to the number of adult males 55 and over. It would be very easy to assign a young man not one but 2 mentors, etc. I mean, you can use your own creativity. The fact is, this problem is not intractable and incapable of solving. Once you understand that the wisdom of our species for over 1 million years is that young men are crazy if they don't have older men invested in their lives. Period. Fact. Take it to the bank. Platinum plated. Now, do we see any evidence that our leaders understand this at all? No. They're going to build more prisons and they're going to pass laws that are going to outlaw guns. Well, this is blaming the victim. It is allowing young minority males predominantly to take the blame for the moral abdication of the entire civilization. Now, I'm not kidding about this. You and your children have a deep investment in this. If we do not address this problem of passivity and abdication of older males, the women are not going to get off. I'll get to you in a minute. But if we do not face this passivity and abdication of older males in their responsibility morally, politically, ethically, every possible way, spiritually, for the Holocaust of young males in our world, then your grandchildren are very likely to live in hell. See? Rumi says, light the candle that's in their hand. In other words, you're a forest of leaders. And if your response is, who, me, that's your shadow. See? Because down in your shadow is a leader that makes you nervous. See? I'm not kidding you. So this is the thing we've got to face. We've got this archetypal fantasy of the Redeemer Messiah. And it's all around, and we kept thinking, well, we've got to elect the right president, or we've got to elect the right governor, or we've got to elect the right mayor. And as long as we think that way, and as long as we encourage people to think that way, we're just contributing to the problem. Who is the leader that we await? Well, it is you. That's the leader we await. And this is it's something I say to people all over, and it's very scary right at first, but only right at first. Because if you can get past your initial, oh no, and then you can say, well now, what could I do on these things? It's amazing how fast you come up with a list as long as your arm of things you could do. Okay, other people, then, let's see, it's now 10:30. How long do we have? 30 more minutes? So other comments and questions and ideas about engaging these public policy issues? Yes.
Don Bessinger, I'm intrigued by the deeper implications of the popular and political science term self-government.
Yes.
One can see a constitutional crisis
Yes.
looming
Yes.
from all the violence
Yes.
if we don't rapidly disseminate this deeper level of the term meaning in the term self-government.
Yep. Yep. John Perry has a book that never got many people didn't find out about it, and I wish maybe we could get that in the bookstore for Journey in the Wholeness. It's called The Heart of History. And somebody, wasn't a very good editor, didn't help John choose a title because that doesn't tell you much. The Heart of History. Well, what's that? Actually, the book is about the way in which in history the sacred king image of carrying authority has become integrated into the individual and made democracy possible. So that's what that's one of the things you see. That as this stuff becomes integrated, not projected out on political figures, but integrated into the self of individuals, then democracy becomes possible. We start having the kind of citizens who will hold a government accountable. We still haven't got the kind of citizens, if people say you have the kind of government you deserve. Well, there's a lot of truth to that. That these congressmen are not demagogues. They have to be inspected constantly. Don't expect what you don't inspect. And so the formation, there it is again, what you're saying, Don. It's like the formation of the self is a requirement if you are to have a functioning commonwealth. And all the people that want to say that psychology is irrelevant for social justice are just totally out of touch. Yes, somebody else had their hand. Yes.
The author again, please.
John Perry. He's the guy who taught me a lot of what I understand about the role of the king and queen in the psyche. And he's got a lot of fascinating books, particularly Roots of Renewal and Myth and Madness, which is another one that's wonderful about transformative processes in psychotics. But the book that is relevant for Don's point is The Heart of History. It's not a good title. Somebody should have helped him title it. But it's about the maturation and integration process of getting this king and queen off of pharaohs and sacral kings, then into a kind of a Hebrew form of kingship, which the king knew he wasn't God, and then in the incarnation in Christ, you see all that stuff comes into the human, and then continuing right out of that, you get democracy, in which the cohesive self is the vessel which makes possible a democratic civilization. And without the four cardinal virtues, democracy, as Plato said, deteriorates into tyranny of the masses. Well, we could go on and on and on, but let me just say that this stuff is not just meta-theoretical stuff. That is to say, if we don't balance the four quarters and we don't get it involved in public policy pretty soon, we're going to face, it's not just going to be a gathering storm. We're going to be in the midst of the tempest. Thank you so much. You've been wonderful. I look forward to talking to you later. Namaste.